Chapter 1. Hinduism, the Universal Law. When His Holiness the Jagadguru was camping in a quiet village during the course of his tours, a European gentleman came to see him. He seemed to have studied some popular books on the Vedanta philosophy and felt attracted by its teachings. Foreigner. Swamiji, may I know if you are prepared to take converts to your religion? Personally, I find much worth in it, and I have known very many friends who so love your philosophy and religion that they would like to call themselves Hindus, if that were possible. Swamiji, the Hindu system of philosophy and religion is bound to attract all thinking minds, but we do not take in converts. Foreigner, if you think that your system is an invaluable one and is bound to be useful to all mankind, does it not follow that you must be prepared to take in converts? Swamiji, not necessarily. Conversion is possible or necessary only when one person who desires to be converted does not already belong to a religion to which he desired to be converted. Foreigner, how is that? Do you mean to say that no formal conversion is necessary as those who desire to be Hindus are already Hindus by the virtue of that desire itself? Swamiji, no. I mean that all are Hindus, irrespective of their desire to be called Hindus. Foreigner, how can that be? Swamiji, Hinduism is a name which has now been given to our system, but its real name has always been Sanatana Dharma or the eternal law. It does not date from a particular point of time or begin from a particular founder. Being eternal, it is also universal. It knows no territorial jurisdiction. All beings born and to be born belong to it. They cannot escape this law, whether they concede its binding force or not. The eternal truth that fire burns does not depend on for its validity upon our allegiance to it. If we accept the truth, so much better for us. If we do not, so much worse for us. In either case, the law is there, immutable, universal and eternal. Such is a Sanatana Dharma. Foreigner, if then the entire world is Hindu according to you, how do you justify the restrictive caste system? Swamiji, I only told you that all were Hindus and therefore entitled to seek guidance in the tenets of our religion. I did not say that the guidance will be same for all. Countless are the varieties of temperament, training, environments, hereditary, leanings, prenatal tendencies and so on, so that it will be impossible to expect any single stereotyped system of conduct for all. Our Dharma, taking due notice of this undeniable fact, resolves itself into two parts, Samanya Dharma or ordinary law and Vishesha Dharma or special law. The former guides all mankind. The former and the later both together guide those who come under the caste system. Foreigner, if the rules of caste have any spiritual value, why not give the benefit of them to those also who are outside it? Swamiji, if water is beneficial to a thirsty man, does it follow that it will be beneficial to a man who has fever and therefore feels thirsty? Foreigner, your illustration is not fair. There is nothing to show that a special rule of conduct prescribed for a particular caste will be injurious to others and who do not belong to that caste or to any caste at all. Swamiji, on the other hand, you must realize that there is nothing to show that a special rule of conduct prescribed for a particular caste will be beneficial to the others. So the mere fact that it is prescribed for that caste makes it a special law and therefore not applicable to the generality of mankind. If the Shastras are the only guide for telling us that a particular line of conduct is beneficial, we cannot throw them overboard when they tell us in the same breath for whom it is beneficial. Our system, and in fact any system which aims at regulation of conduct, must be based on the principle of adhikara or competency. Those who belong to the caste are competent to pursue the Vishesha Dharma, the others are competent to pursue only Samanya Dharma. Further, the nature of the competency required can be learnt only from the Shastras which prescribe the Dharma. Foreigner, if then the Hindu Shastras are to be taken as the guide for all humanity, and if all persons born are, in your view, born in your religion, how do you account for the prevalence of other faiths? Swamiji, it is their fault that they do not recognize that they are but aspects of Sanatana Dharma. The highest teachings of any other religion do find a place in our religion and are but a phase of ordinary law laid down there. Foreigner, don't you think, Swamiji, that your claim will sound somewhat over high and that the others may not be disposed to concede it? Swamiji, the disposition of others to concede the claim of Hinduism is quite beside the point, for the intrinsic worth of anything is always there, whether one recognizes it or not. As to the claim being high, I desire to point out to you that I cannot possibly put it lower. Foreigner, how is that? Swamiji, please bear with me if I take Christianity as an example to illustrate my point. If belief is the personality of Christ is a necessary condition of salvation, we must be prepared to say that all those persons who have lived before the time of Jesus have been denied the benefit of salvation for no fault of theirs and simply because they happened to be born when Jesus was yet unborn. The same reasoning would deny salvation to those who have lived even at the same time as Jesus or since that time, but may not have even heard of him. Further, don't you think it is unfair on the part of God that he should suddenly wake up on a particular day and prescribe for all mankind a necessary condition for salvation? Did he forget that the people who had misfortune to be born before Jesus had souls to save? If he did not forget, did he take care to prescribe for them the means necessary to enable them to attain salvation? If he did so prescribe, his prescription could not possibly have included a belief in the Jesus to be born. Therefore, the only logical hypothesis which a reasonable man can accept is that God, even when he created the first man, if there was such a time, himself simultaneously promulgated also the means for his salvation. For even the first man was certainly in need of salvation. We accordingly say of other Vedas that they were coeval with the first man, not in the sense that they were created together, for we believe that there was no first creation and that everything is beginningless, but in the sense that they were coexisting, and that they are revelations of God himself. Any religion which traces its origin from a later time, any time of a creation, and from any other teacher, then God is bound to be imperfect and short-lived. Revelation. Foreigner. I understand your point, but Swamiji, you have made the assumption that man is not capable of finding out the means of salvation himself and that he requires somebody, be it God, to point them out to him. Swamiji, before he can possibly find out the means, man must first know that there is something to be striven for, that there is such a something that can be known by us only if somebody who partakes of that something or has realized it in the actual experience informs us about its experience. This information coming from beyond the range of our experience is itself in the nature of a revelation. Further, how can one possibly know for certain that a particular course of conduct does lead to a salvation unless it is taught to us by somebody who has pursued that particular course and has attained salvation, or by somebody who by his omniscience is able to visualize at the same time the pathway as well as the goal, or by somebody who is the goal itself? In the first alternative, the question will arise, how did that somebody know before he entered on the course of conduct which is so successfully followed? In the second alternative also, the question how did he attain such an omniscience will require an answer. Therefore, the third alternative, which traces all revelations to the God himself, is the only logical hypothesis. Foreigner. Certainly, we need no revelation to teach us that God exists. The means of knowing him may be difficult to understand and some guidance may be necessary from those who have known him. But the fact of God's existence does not require any revelation, for we can ourselves infer it by the aid of our reasoning faculty. Swamiji, if the existence of God is so patent a fact and so easily inferable, how do you account for atheists and agnostics in the world? Do you mean to say that their powers of intellect and capacity of reasoning are in any way inferior to ours? On the other hand, you will find that the thinkers who have taken the trouble to think out the existence of God and failed are the men of extraordinary intellect. Their failure to prove God is not due to any essentially uninferable. Further, assuming that by the aid of reasoning you can infer the existence of God, who told you that there is a God to be inferred? Certainly you depend upon some previous information for that knowledge. If somebody tells you that there is a God, you may try your reasoning power at proving him. If you have never heard of God at all, there is nothing to incite or awaken your powers of reasoning. Foreigner. It is not necessary that I should have heard of God before I exercise my reasoning faculty. The word God may not be before my mind, but a conception of something changeless and eternal. Underlying this ever-changing, evanescent world naturally suggests itself to me as a matter of inference. Swamiji. How? Foreigner. It cannot be denied that the world is made up of opposites. Light and darkness, activity and inertness, pain and pleasure, life and death and so on. I infer from this that inasmuch there is a change in the world, there must also be its opposite, a non-changing factor. Inasmuch as everything is dying every moment, I infer that there is a non-dying factor also, and so on. Thus, by mere inference, I am able to postulate the existence of a single homogeneous, eternal, unchanging being as opposed to the many heterogeneous, evanescent, changing beings. Swamiji, may I know what is the opposite of a horse? A horse is a positive object of perception. From its existence, you must be able to infer its opposite. What is that opposite? My question may seem somewhat crude, but nevertheless requires an answer. Foreigner. Well then, Swamiji, I shall say that the opposite of horse is a non-horse. Swamiji, quite right. Is it a positive thing or is it a mere negation? Foreigner. In as much as I have called it the opposite of horse, I must say that it is a positive thing. Swamiji, is it an animal or do you include in this conception everything else in the universe? Foreigner. Strictly speaking, I must include therein everything else in the universe, for even a stone is a non-horse. But ordinarily, as the negation goes with the horse, it is sufficient to negate the horselessness alone, and so, by a non-horse is ordinarily meant an animal which is not a horse. Swamiji, that is, the conception of the opposite of a particular thing can only be a thing akin to that thing, but different from it in that particularity. In other words, there is no absolute opposite for anything in the world. The want of a particular characteristic in one thing which we find in another makes us think that they are opposites of each other. A particular intensity of illumination is capable of being viewed as a particular degree of light. It can also be viewed as a particular degree of darkness. Light and darkness are not therefore an absolute opposites of each other, but only relative aspects of light or of darkness as we may choose to view them. Your theory of absolute opposites therefore has no basis in fact. Further, you seem to have also misconceived the scope of inference. As I have mentioned before, unless you have a prior knowledge of the fact that there is something to be inferred, no process of inference can be possibly started in your mind. Suppose a person who has never seen or heard of fire sees a smoke. He cannot possibly infer the existence of fire, but to him the smoke that he actually sees is the ultimate fact. A thing which is explains itself and does not generate in your mind any desire to know what may be behind it. Unless we have already reason to think that the thing which is really not the thing in itself, but depends for its existence upon something else. Similarly, if the world is ever changing, and if we never heard of changeless being, we will accept the fact of changing world as it is. The changing world will remain the ultimate fact for us. It requires no explanation, but it is there. If it is changing, what else is there to explain? It is its nature to change. If it ceases to change, it will cease to be the world. If, however, we have heard of a changeless being, explanations are necessary to justify the changing character of the world, to point out the relationship between that being and the world, and to prove that the relationship. Revelation is thus necessary even to put us on the track of inquiry by positing the existence of that changeless being. Reason will be of great help to us in that inquiry. In the absence of sure guide of revelation, reasoning is mere groping in the dark. Again, if you think that everything in the world is changing, and if you want to infer something from this perceived fact, your inference can only be in this way. Everything is changing. If there is another thing that must also be changing, that is, in the region of inference, you cannot get away from the perceived relationship between a cause and a phenomena. In fact, inference is based only on the invariability of that perceived relationship. If your experience tells you that whatever is changes, your inference cannot possibly tell you that there is something which is but does not change. On the other hand, it will tell you that inasmuch as the something is, it also must change. Finally, the utmost the reason may take you is that something changeless may exist. It cannot tell you as positive fact that it does not exist or it does exist, nor can it tell you what it is. Foreigner, I am greatly obliged to you, Swamiji, for presenting before me the value of revelation in this light. I have never heard it so expounded till now. Other religions. Foreigner, but again my initial difficulty in understanding the need for, rather the fact of, several conflicting religions, all purporting to point out the path to the light remains unsolved. Swamiji, I told you the principle of adhikara or competency rules the world. As there are various gradations in competency, there are various fates suited to those particular gradations. Foreigner, I can quite understand this, but no religion is prepared to admit that it is intended for people of a particular grade alone. In fact, every religion claims to be the highest and only true one. Swamiji, suppose a young boy simultaneously asked by 4 persons, issuing independent commands to light a lamp, to trim the wick, to fill the oil can, and to put out the light. He will be in a hopeless mess and will not at all know what to do. All these things cannot be done simultaneously, but each of those 4 persons insists upon his command being obeyed. What is the poor boy to do? If a 5th gentleman turns up and says, bring me a pair of scissors, he is adding one more command to the 4 already existing. The boy is already perplexed by the 4 contradictory commands. Now he has to choose from among 5. That is, his difficulty is increased by the advent of 5th gentleman and not at all lessened. If, however, this gentleman is kindly disposed towards the boy and wants to help him out of his difficulty, and if the boy with true faith turns to him for help, the gentleman has to tell him emphatically, bring me the pair of scissors, you need not obey the other commands. That is, to serve as a practical guide to the perplexed boy, he has to say that his command alone is the one to be obeyed and not the others. Similarly, any religious teacher claiming to give practical guidance to those who have faith in him has necessary to say, do as I ask you to do. I ignore the commands of others. Foreigner, that means the religious teachers adopted their teachings to the caliber and competence of the people who came to them for the guidance and to the circumstances